My name is Ross Deuchar and I'm Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice at the University of the West of Scotland. And today I'd like to talk about some of the issues relating to masculinity. It's a subject that I've been writing about and speaking about for some time now. In Scotland, I believe that there are still some deeply ingrained and problematic views out there about what it means to be and to act like a man. In the west of the country, perhaps in particular, in too many male social contexts, the display of aggression and even violence is often viewed as being manly, while any kind of emotional expression, aside from anger perhaps, is often regarded as being a little bit weak, a bit soft, and even a bit feminine. But I would argue that the stifling of certain forms of emotional engagement and expression among young men can actually lead to deep-rooted mental health issues that we need to be conscious of. Statistics suggest that over 3/4 of the people who take their own lives in Scotland are men, and that suicide rates among younger men have increased year on year. And I think it's often the case in Scotland that men who do have a problem tend to prefer to solve that problem on their own and perhaps not admit to others that they're facing any kind of challenge or turn towards others for any kind of support. In Scotland, or perhaps especially in the west of the country, young men and boys are often made to feel that they need to man up. And these messages are conveyed to them in the family home, reinforced in the community and in peer networks, and of course also reinforced in the media and in social media. Manning up is often constructed around the perceived need to avoid revealing any kind of vulnerable emotions, to display bravery, toughness, and physical prowess. Boys who display any kind of sensitivity, emotion, or vulnerability, or perhaps even who call out inappropriate forms of male behaviour, including sexism or physical violence, I think still run the risk of being ridiculed by their peers in lots of contexts. The word gay is still too often used inappropriately and used as a derogatory term, and boys often made to feel that they need to perform masculinity within a very narrow set of cultural parameters. Of course, social media can play a detrimental role here, where hurtful statements are shared and reshared within peer groups, and young men often feeling that they can't disconnect from it. This sometimes leads to boys feeling the need to engage in homophobic policing of themselves and others to avoid any kind of signs of perceived femininity and weakness. Now, as you can imagine, the pressure associated with this and the taunts that can emerge when signs of vulnerability do become exposed can increase the prevalence of low mood that can be a precursor ultimately for anxiety, depression, and even suicide among young men. As professionals, whether we're working as teachers, as youth and outreach workers, as social workers, as community police officers, whatever our particular role might be, when we're working with young men, I think we need to be sensitive to and aware of all of these issues. We need to explore with young men what it actually means to be a man, to get them thinking about the messages they receive from society, to be critical of those messages, and to begin to deconstruct and disrupt the stereotypes. We need to foster emotional diversity in boys by encouraging them to open up, to talk about their feelings, and to begin to associate vulnerability, generativity, compassion, and love as manly qualities that can and should be displayed within relationships. Role models, I think, can really help here, and adult males who are working with young men need to avoid the risk of reinforcing and validating that tough guy image. They need to become advocates, I think, for displaying emotion and sharing role models of those who seem to fall outside the narrow template of what we might describe as hegemonic masculinity. Importantly, I think we all need to be very aware and alert to homophobic bullying and language, and to actively encourage young men to speak out against all forms of violence, harassment, name-calling and bullying. As we continue in our battle to overcome the epidemic of mental ill health that unfortunately is currently blighting our communities, and the particular challenges associated with young male suicide and self-harm, I believe a lot of work still needs to be done. I am encouraged in Scotland at the present time that a cultural shift is beginning to happen. The stigma associated with mental health is shifting. More male role models are opening up about their own personal struggles, and more support groups are beginning to encourage men to start talking. But more work still needs to be done to project multifaceted views of masculinity, to tackle and break down the stereotypes and prevent the kind of tragic instances of male self-harm and suicide that too often still emerge among young men. I hope that this piece of film helps to generate more discussion and raise more awareness about these issues, and stimulates more action in order to overcome some of the issues that I've been describing today. And thanks very much for listening.